welcome everyone. Sorry about that. Welcome everyone to the July 29, 2001 Land Use Coordinating Committee meeting. My name is Carrie Stevens, and I am a planning administrator in the Community Development Group here at ARC. I am glad all of you are able to join us and our amazing guest speakers for our LUCC program today. Today's main topic is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, CEDS for short. I will start off discussing what the CEDS is, the Economic Development Administration, also known as EDA requirements, and how the CEDS has helped communities in our region advance local economic development efforts, and why we need you as local governments involved in the preparation of the update. Next slide, Molly. We will then be joined by Misty Martin and Greg Simon, who formerly served as the co-chairs of the Atlanta Regional Marketing Alliance, RMA for short, which was a major initiative that came out of the 2012 CEDS and was also included in the 2017 CEDS. Just a little background about Misty and Greg. Misty serves as president and CEO of the Cherokee Office of Economic Development. Misty worked for the Cherokee County Chamber and Development Authority and the Carl Vinson Institute of Government at the University of Georgia, and was president and CEO of the Covington-Newton County Chamber before assuming her current role in 2004. Greg is a senior vice president of project and partner development at the Metro Chamber, also known as MAC. In his role, Simon works to build and manage relationships with economic development partners across the 29-county Metro Atlanta region and cultivate job growth across MAC's industry cluster. He also assists businesses and their consultants in their evaluation of Metro Atlanta for new or expanded operations. These are, of course, just short bios for Greg and Misty, who have a wealth of experience in economic development. They will be a great resource for us today. Following Greg and Misty, we will have our own Marion Liu, Community Engagement and Arts Program Manager, and Ryan Schlom, Planner with a focus on research and data, who will outline the creative efforts ARC is brainstorming to engage previously underrepresented groups and who have been most impacted by COVID-19. Throughout the morning, we will have poll questions for the group. Since we are just getting started, we want to get your thoughts, needs, and expectations before embarking on this important process. We will end the morning with Kelsey, Wade Haas, a planner in our Natural Resources Group, who will set the stage for briefs at this and upcoming LUCC meetings on climate change resources offered to local governments at little or no cost. This will kick off a larger series of bite-sized presentations on climate mitigation and adaptation resources and build on the work already being done at ARC. I'm going to now turn it over to Molly, who will go through some housekeeping items.
Good morning, everyone. All right, I'm actually going to jump into just a few announcements first, and then we'll get into housekeeping. I'll be brief. All of these announcements will be in your follow-up email, and I'll just run down the list really quickly. The Regional Excellence Awards, that used to be our Development of Excellence Awards. Applications are due on August 3rd. I've included a link here, but if you have any questions, feel free to email me. The next Atlanta Regional Housing Forum, which will focus on expanding housing choice, will be held on August 4th. Also have a link there for you to register. The first 2021-2022 MARC session will be held on August 14th. This year, we are using a hybrid approach to engage with our high school students, and so we're really excited about that, and you can go to the link I provided here to find out a little bit more information. And then finally, applications for LCI PE funds are due on August 27th. I've included a link here. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to Amy Goodwin and Jared Lombard. Again, all of this will be provided in the follow-up email, along with those email addresses of individuals that you can contact for more information. I know you've heard all of this before, but we're going to go through it quickly. We've got two ways for you to participate today: Zoom and, as Carrie said, Poll Everywhere. You know that we're now using the webinar platform through Zoom. So we actually have two different ways that you can communicate with us in the sort of chat arena. If you have a question, go ahead and put those in the Q&A function, not in the chat. If you have a question for one of our panelists, put that in that Q&A function. If you have a comment, if something sparks an idea or something something that's happening in your area, go ahead and throw that in the chat for us. And then if we have time, we will ask you to raise your hand and wait to be called on to speak. And with Poll Everywhere, you've got two ways of participating there. You can go on to a web URL, pollev.com/cdev555. You'll wait for the question to appear and then respond. You do not need to take note of any of this information. It will appear at the top of every Poll Everywhere slide. But the other way to participate is through texting. You'll text CDEV555 to the number 22333 once to join, and then you'll text all of your responses after that to that same number, 22333. All right, so I wanted to be brief, and we can go ahead and do a little practice Poll Everywhere question just to get comfortable with it, and then we'll jump right into Carrie's presentation. So it looks like I've got one result. I'm going to wait just a few more seconds for a few more results. I know we've got to wait just to get people logged in to either the text or the web version, and then we'll see those responses start coming in. And I see Amy put a little link in the chat for you all about those LCIPE funds. Thank you for that, Amy. All right, looks like we've got some results. Show responses now. All right, looks like we've got chocolate, butter pecan, and other. We'll wait just a few more seconds and then we'll move on. All right, looks like butter pecan for the win.
Wow, nobody likes vanilla. Nobody. That's
all right.
telling.
All right, Carrie, you're up.
Well, thank you, Molly. As always, there's lots going on at ARC, so we hope you can participate in a lot of our efforts. As Molly mentioned, this is a great time to provide your feedback, so raise your hand, enter into the comments, and hopefully we can get to all of your questions, concerns, and comments. Again, I'm so glad you're here to learn about the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy and how the process and plan can help your organizations, communities, and the region. I will be heading up the 5-year update of the CEDS, which is required by the Economic Development Administration. Some of you in this group may remember a similar effort in 2017 known as Catalyst. If not, don't worry, we will get you up to speed during the course of the LUCC meeting and will outline additional measures we are taking to focus on equity and resiliency, as well as small business support, retention, and expansion. This effort will take place over the next year, ending in the fall of 2022. Next slide, please. So what is the CEDS? Next slide. Generally, as you can see here, the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy is a locally based, regionally driven economic development process and document that creates the space for your region to identify its strengths and weaknesses and brings together a diverse set of partners to generate good jobs, diversify the economy, and spur economic growth. Similar to our regional transportation plan or our regional housing strategy, the CEDS provides us with an opportunity to zoom out and understand what are the most common and major detriments, influences, and obstructions to economic competitiveness in our region. By determining these common challenges, we can identify strategies that we can work on together across sectors and political boundaries to remain one of the fastest growing and prosperous regions in the country. Next slide, please. So CEDS facts. Next slide, please. It is required for EDA designation as an economic development district. So you ask, what's an economic development district? And economic development districts are multi-jurisdictional entities composed of multiple counties. They lead the locally based, regionally driven economic development process, which is the CEDS. As you can see on the slide, there's 11 counties in the ARC Economic Development District. Forsyth County just joined in July of this year and will be part of this planning process. If there's anyone from Forsyth on the call, we welcome you and we're really looking forward to working with you. As I said, it's updated every 5 years. We are also required to do annual reports. They are submitted to the EDA regional office for approval. And as a very important note that we will discuss a little bit later, EDA funding, including the EDA's Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance Programs and CARES Act funding requires compliance with the SEDS. In addition, other federal, state, and private funding grant applications may benefit for compliance with this document, as it will be a regionally adopted document. On a local note, we will briefly discuss some of the 2017 plans, initiatives, and successes. Next slide. I think Molly will go to our first poll.
As soon as I have that option to share those results, I'll do it. It hasn't popped up for me just yet.
It'll be definitely interesting to see the answer to this question. As part of this effort, we definitely want a lot of people to be familiar with the SEDS over the course of the next year.
Well, for whatever reason, it is not allowing me to show those results. They are coming in. I don't know if you can see that. We've got 13 results coming in. All right, so Jared has just told me to advance the slide and go back and see if that doesn't work. Oh, here we go.
Yeah, so a lot of no's, which is significant. So that gives us good information when we're moving forward with the process that we really need to get the word out. And we would hope that the organizations that are represented on this call will help us do so. So we can, if you're ready, Molly, we can go to the next slide.
Sorry about that. It's also not letting me advance. So let's see. Give me just one moment.
Okay, so I was wrong. People do like vanilla. It's not that.
a few people. I was very surprised by the result with butter pecan. Thought maybe chocolate would take that one, but I guess not.
All right.
Well, Molly's getting a bit organized with trying to get the technology to help us out. The next slide really goes into what it can do and why it's important. So I don't like to just generally read from the slides, but I think the points on this slide are worth reading. They're foundational to this effort. So the first is the SEDS helps us to build on the strengths of the region, as well as identify gaps in resources or expertise that need to be addressed. The SEDS planning process can facilitate regional collaboration, which is very important for this effort. There we go. Expand supply chains and grow and support new industry clusters. With the SEDS in place, regions are more likely to attract federal funds and technical assistance by demonstrating resources that are efficient and effective. And the SEDS process can make your region more resilient and better positioned to plan for, respond to, and recover from natural disasters and economic shocks, especially in our current situation, which is the COVID variants and the COVID-19. The SEDS can be much more than a static document, but rather it should be an engaging platform that generates region-wide discussions and serves as a call to action for economic development. In addition to this, we are focusing on a user-friendly document that is easy to use by a variety of different stakeholder groups and individuals. We want this to be something that is used and is a document that continues to evolve over time. Next slide, please. So EDA requirements, this is the least exciting slide, but just wanted to go over what will be involved in the plan. So we have a summary background, and this is a clear understanding of what the economic situation is at this time. It's supported by relevant and current data. We'll be doing a SWOT analysis. Many of us know that a SWOT analysis is an exercise where we determine our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We'll also do and develop a strategic direction and action plan, an evaluation framework, and have a section on economic resilience. Next slide, please. So what can the SEDS do for you? And why it's important? As we've discussed, the document provides the region with a guide for economic development, but it can also be a conduit for funding planning, infrastructure, and other projects from not only the EDA, but other federal, state, and private sources. Some federal funds, such as the ones listed on this slide, are tied strategically to compliance with the SEDS. We at ARC are often asked to forward a letter of compliance with the SEDS and support for these projects. In addition, since this is, again, a regionally adopted plan, it can also be used to support all sorts of grant applications. So these are 3 applications that were regionally and recently funded through the CARES Act. The first is Operation Hope, and they were awarded $2.25 million. The EDA investment in Operation Hope will provide technical assistance and guidance to small minority and women-owned businesses across the Southeast to help them remain viable and resilient, in the face of the pandemic. True Fund Financial was awarded $750,000 to provide training and affordable capital to small businesses impacted by the coronavirus pandemic in the Metro Atlanta area in Georgia. And the final is the Russell Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship that is pictured here on this slide. It's quite an impressive facility. I think it's over 54,000 square feet now, but their $5.3 million grant was given to improve and expand the facility and increase their capacity to promote entrepreneurship, support sustainable economic growth, and create jobs in the region. So many of the press releases that come from EDA contain the following comment, which solidifies that it's very important for everyone to participate in the SEDS. This project, and this is something directly from the press releases, this project was made possible by the regional planning efforts led by the Atlanta Regional Commission, which EDA funds to help bring together the public and private sectors to create economic development, to strengthen the regional economy, support private capital investment, and create jobs. The EDA believes that great economic development is the foundation of that is great economic development planning. Next, Molly will have a few additional poll questions for us.
And let's cross our fingers the technology works this time. Yep.
Based on the fact that many people were not familiar with the SEDS, I assume the answer will be somewhat similar here, but we definitely want to know if you have used it in the past.
And it doesn't look like the poll is actually activating here because it doesn't have the A, B, and C there to the right. But if your response is yes, text in or type in an A. If it's no, type in a B. And if it's an I don't know, type in a C. And I'm going to see if I can't jumpstart it to working. All right, so, all right. So it looks like we got it on the wrong one. So let's go back. And actually, you know, we can use this because we know what the A, B, and C are. So Carrie and I can use that information.
Absolutely, absolutely. Your answers to the poll questions will give us a good foundation when we're starting to get into our community engagement, both for the general public and for local governments and organizations. So thank you for participating. I don't think I've seen an A yet. So we definitely, through this planning process, want to have more A's when we do the same poll next year. Oh, there's a yes.
And Carrie, I don't know if you want to go ahead and jump into this question now and have
Yes,
people
please.
just respond to the same.
So we didn't get a lot of yeses, so I think we only got one. So the next question is, how has your community used the SEDS in their local planning activities? So the one person that said yes, we're interested in seeing how you did use it. Well, if we don't have an answer to that question, we can move forward. But if you do have an answer, put it in the chat or get with us after the meeting. So we can go to the next slide, Molly, if we're ready. Oh, the poll's not working. Housing strategy.
All right, let me advance it outside of this and then I'll reshare.
Thank you, Molly. And again, while Molly's getting the slides back up for time, I'll get started. The next section will be some of the successes from the SEDS from 2017. There were many, but I briefly wanted to share a few successes, and then we'll be getting into one of our big successes, which is the Regional Marketing Alliance, which we'll have Misty and Greg in just a minute. I've indicated the three that I'm going to talk about today here. Expand the Regional Economic Development Marketing Alliance, which Misty and Greg will be talking about in just a minute. Fully support the Learn for Life and replicate similar cradle to career initiatives throughout Metro Atlanta, and facilitate a regional housing strategy. The Learn for Life is a regional effort to help improve education outcomes for our region's children through cross-section collaboration. With leadership from ARC, the United Way, the Atlanta Chamber, and the Community Foundation, 8 of our region schools are working together to reach this goal. So that's a great initiative. The second is the Metro Atlanta Housing Strategy, which was adopted and is a guide to help communities understand their housing challenges and explore solutions through actionable strategies. In addition, ARC with regional partners has also done a number of housing forums throughout the years to discuss this topic. So the final success story we will highlight today is the expansion of the Regional Economic Development Marketing Alliance. This is an example of a great collaboration through our region. In just a minute, as I said, Greg and Misty will discuss this. Next slide, please. So as we get started with this process, I would like us to think about the following focus points for this engagement process and for the document as a whole. We need to value the process, commit to measurable success, promote cross-sector cooperation and collaboration, tell a compelling story about the region's past, present, future with a focus on people, motivate action and implementation, and include all groups in the Atlanta region. We have a few final polls. I think Molly's going to bring those up. And the first is, what is your community's most pressing economic development need? These are just a few. If there's others, you can place those in the chat. Oh, here we go. Housing and transportation seem to be the big winners. For right now, give it a few more minutes. And this is great information as we start to put together our plan for the next year in different areas we're going to focus on. Obviously, all of these are focus areas, but these will be some that we will dig deep into. So Molly, I think we, in the interest of time, we want to move on to the next. And so this is just a general open-ended question. What projects or resources would you like to see incorporated into the SEDS update? So anything you'd like to see. Well, I'll let you put in your answers and I'll wrap up my section of this presentation. As I mentioned, Greg and Misty were the former co-chairs of the RMA for most of the last 5 years and will give us some valuable, the last 5 years, well, since the 2017 SEDS was adopted, and will give us some valuable insight on the importance of the organization and the wins over the last 5 years and beyond. I, for one, enjoy the cooperation and collaboration of this group and excited to hear the discussion. So I'll go back to the poll question. Affordable housing, gentrification, the lack of availability of starter workforce. As we all know, that's come up a lot. Financing affordable housing, MARTA, all great ideas and important for our next SEDS update. Housing for older adults, downtown development, always a big issue. Well, thanks everyone for those. Housing for everyone. Obviously, from all of our poll questions, housing is going to be a big issue as we discuss the SEDS moving forward. So I'd like to end. I recently heard the following quote, which I found fitting for the overall SEDS and for Greg and Misty's discussion about RMA. Regionalism is a committed effort to improve communities through increased coordination and collaboration, maximizing efficiency through united approaches while preserving individual aspirations. So I think that's a great quote. And that's from Steve Etcher, the former executive director of Boonslick Regional Planning Commission in Missouri. It shows that regionalism works. I don't know him personally, but thought this was a great quote. I will move forward and let Greg and Misty start off their presentation. So thank you guys for being here. And thank you, Greg and Misty, for giving us a little insight into the RMA.
Thanks, Carrie. We really appreciate being with you all today. And also thanks to all of you that are on the call and to learn a little bit more about this. As Carrie mentioned, the Atlanta Regional Marketing Alliance was formed from the 2012 SEDS, which is so much easier to say than Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. But we really got a lot of feedback in 2012 that we wanted to work together as a unit and that we needed closer collaboration amongst the counties. And so the Regional Marketing Alliance consists of the 10 metro counties, now 11, with Forsyth joining in. The Metro Atlanta Chamber, which Greg will talk about, the Georgia Power Company, and Georgia Department of Economic Development, in addition to ARC and Carrie serving with us. And it's one of the things that survived from that 2012 strategy into the 2017 Catalyst strategy. And so we were glad that we made the mark and were able to stick around and get the vote of approval through that next strategy. But the vision is for Atlanta to be the region that works for everyone, that's built upon a bedrock of success through strong collaboration and a culture of trust. And so I really like that quote that you pulled up, Carrie, because it's so true for the counties. I mean, we're trying to work together as a unit, but we're all trying to still individually perform for our counties and our cities as well. And empowering upward economic mobility for all is the core goal of our group. And so all of the economic developers from the region work collaboratively to promote Metro Atlanta, but also it's a great best practices sharing format as well. So we've learned, we've done pitch training on how we present ourselves and how we present ourselves as a region to site location consultants and to real estate brokers that we're trying to get attention here in Metro Atlanta. But for us personally, especially over the last year or so, being able to share those best practices from small business grants that came down through CARES Act monies through our county and city governments. And I know we really leaned on Cobb County with the grants. They were wonderful to share information with us on how they had lifted their grant program up. And each one of them is a little different, but being able to share that information is so worthwhile. The development of property, and I know we have a lot of planners on the call, but as we try to preserve land for mixed use and light industrial development, it's been really great to share that amongst the counties as well. We even share incentive information about, okay, how do you retain your existing industries? What do you do? How do you recruit technology? How do you recruit and enhance entrepreneurship in your communities? And then most recently for us, funding strategies. So we had all of our eggs in the government basket as far as funding goes. And our last local economic development strategy, our consultant said, hey, you might want to diversify. So once again, leaned on Cobb County, leaned on Gwinnett. They were really wonderful in sharing their experience with public-private partnerships. And I hope I was able to give back when Douglas County just started their public-private. So, and all of that is from the ongoing communication that happens with the RMA, and then also with all of the efforts that Greg and his team spearhead through MAC. So I think we are head and shoulders above where we were back in 2012, and I credit ARC's inclusiveness with the economic development strategy and really getting people involved and not letting it be a piece of paper that sits, or not a piece of paper, probably a stack of paper that sits on a shelf, but really a working document with people engaged across the region. So anyway, just want to say thanks for letting us be involved, and Greg, turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Misty. And that was a great overview. I agree with all of it. I think just to give a little bit of context in terms of what we as economic developers do, and you know, we all do slightly different things, but I think a goal that we have in common is helping businesses when they're evaluating Metro Atlanta. And typically we're competing with other metro areas in the United States and even in other countries. It's typical that, you know, we'll get a request either from a company directly or they'll hire a consultant. Misty mentioned site location consultants, and these are consultants that work for big global real estate firms like JLL, Cushman, CBRE, or they hire big accounting firms like Deloitte, KPMG, PwC. There's also boutique firms that do this work. And it's a global competition for this investment and for these jobs. And so that's why it's so important for our region to be competitive and also to work together so that when a company is contemplating locating a new facility, I mean, it could be that they're thinking about relocating their headquarters or opening a new R&D facility or a new manufacturing plant or new distribution facility. Or maybe it's a company that's already in the region that's thinking about expanding. And as economic developers, our goal is to make sure that companies are aware of every resource to help them to be successful in our region. And you can imagine how competitive it is across the country. There are people like me and Misty in every state and every county and every city across the United States, and they're all trying to get the attention of companies and site location consultants. And so, we're constantly making sure that businesses and consultants know about all the assets of Metro Atlanta and why we're a good place for this investment. And so working together as a region is critically important to that. And we often hear from our customers that a strength of our region is the collaboration. Collaboration is a theme that we really mention very often. And I credit ARC and the Regional Marketing Alliance for helping to create that collaboration, because it really truly exists. And I think when a company from San Francisco or New York or Germany or wherever it is, when they come to our region and they spend a few days with us, they see that we're all working together, we're all on the same page. Not only do we work together, but we're actually friends, and we like working with each other, and companies want to be a part of that. I think it's infectious. And this day of COVID, I can talk about contagious and infectious in a bad way, and this is actually a good way. Misty mentioned the 2012 SEDS. Not to prepare for this, I was looking back at some of my emails, and I do keep my emails from back then, and I was looking at some of the first meeting minutes from 2014. I think this is going to be our 7th year anniversary in August of our first RMA meeting. And so I was reflecting on looking at the 10 counties. There's only 2 that have the same leaders. One is Misty and the other is Chris Pumphrey in Douglas County. There's been turnover in every other community, and some have had, multiple instances of turnover. And because this is so much about relationships and building trust, it takes constant investment in time, effort, energy to get us together, so that when there's a new person running economic development in Rockdale County, we can reach out as a region and bring them in to the fold and say, we're working together. This is how we can help you. Welcome to the team. We all work together. And it's such a great thing. So I just really want to emphasize the collaboration and how much of a strength that is for our region. I've worked in economic development in Massachusetts and New York before coming to Georgia. And I can tell you it's a very different experience there. So it's really a pleasure to be part of it here in Metro Atlanta. And all the credit to ARC and the power of the SEDS to bring us together. But happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Greg and Misty. That was a great overview. If no one has any questions, I have a few questions for you guys that I think would be great for the community to hear. What has been one of your favorite collaborative efforts? And this can be a project you all worked on or some of the events. For those of you who don't know, RMA hosts a lot of different types of events. So if you could go into either a project or a few projects and some of the events that have been hosted since I've been here, it's been all virtual, but in-person events as well.
Go for it, Greg.
Well, there's a lot to choose from. I'll just briefly mention 2. I mean, number one, and like you said, we've been doing this virtually for the last year and a half. But prior to that, what I really enjoy is that we get together in person pretty much every other month, and we have a meeting in communities, and we move from community. So we might meet in Woodstock one time, and then the next time, we're in Conyers, or the next time, we're in Peachtree Corners. And so we get to travel around the region and actually see what's going on and learn about what communities are doing, and just get to sit and develop relationships with our partners. I think that's been really excellent. The other thing, Carrie, you mentioned events. We put on a lot of events. We do an annual event for site location consultants that are based in Atlanta, because what happens is our competitors from other states are coming to Atlanta, and they're making our Atlanta consultants feel really special. They're taking them out to Braves games and nice dinners and other fun things. So we want to make sure that our Atlanta consultants know that they're loved by their friends in Atlanta also. So once a year, we put together an event that's informative and fun. And we've had the commissioner of GDOT and the commissioner of the Georgia Department of Economic Development and some business leaders, give their opinions on and updates on great things going on in the region. And that's been really a nice thing also.
I agree. The traveling to one another's communities is really helpful because getting to see how they do economic development in their towns and the new developments that are going on in their cities or county is so helpful. And then I've gotten to know a lot of things. I'm from this area. I've been in Atlanta, generally Atlanta my whole life, and being able to travel around and learn something new about your town, your metro is so great. And especially for those that are new to economic development, like Greg was saying, that may be new to Georgia as a whole, being able to bring them in and get them up to speed in a quicker way.
Thanks. I'm also excited at some point to meet everyone in person and travel to some of those communities. So without any additional questions, I thank Greg and Misty for their time and all of their efforts for economic development in our Atlanta region. And we will go ahead and move on to our next presenters, which are our own Marion Liu, again, who's the Community Engagement and Arts Program Manager, and Ryan Schlom, who's a planner with our office, who is specifically focused on research and data. Take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Sometimes my Zoom audio doesn't work. So I wanted to just make a brief introduction to our presentation together, which is really, for too long and by design, many of our communities have been excluded from prosperity and well-being in this region. And if you followed along with our webinars over the past year, and all of our presentations from the research and analytics group, or even just following along with the news, we all realized that COVID brought the inequalities and inequities in our region into sharper focus. And this is really only continued even through some measure of recovery. So when we were thinking about community engagement for the SEDS, we really wanted to delve more deeply into these vastly different experiences of communities during the pandemic and focus on the ones that have been most greatly impacted and harmed by COVID, both as a window into their experiences during COVID, but also as a window of opportunity to a stronger future. One in which resilience isn't just surviving, but resilience is really born out of structural change and collective thriving. So I'm going to pass this back to Ryan because he's been such an important part of really helping us identify these communities that have been hardest hit.
All right, thank you, Marion. Good morning, everyone. I'm Ryan Schlom. I'm a planner and researcher with the Community Development Group at ARC. And as Marion just mentioned, I'll just quickly walk us through some spatial data analysis that we perform to identify places and groups of people that we intend to center in our community engagement strategy for the SEDS. And at the outset of this project, we knew that we needed to develop an engagement strategy that centers the people and the local businesses that have been hit the hardest economically by the pandemic. So to identify who COVID-19 and its attendant economic recession have had the strongest negative effects on, we first turned to what researchers have identified. Next slide, please. Oh, next one again. So we kicked off our search with a review of literature. We were looking at work published by news media, academic sources, and various levels of government. We were looking at who experienced job and income loss at the highest rates, how job losses occurred at different industry and income types, and who was able to transition smoothly into working and going to school from home, and so on. I think at this point, as Marion said, if you've been following along in any way, but especially if you've listened to our research group give presentations over the last year, we're all pretty familiar with the headlines and the general demographic and socioeconomic lines along which this recession has had the most severe economic impact. And then what research has continuously turned out is that the pandemic and recession have rendered the most significant impact along racial and ethnic lines, specifically for Black and Latinx people. We're also probably all familiar with the industries and job types by this point: low wage, service sector jobs, most commonly populated by the same demographics that I just described. In addition to thinking about job and income loss, we're also looking at how changes on our working patterns over the last 18 months have interacted with things like housing stability and people's ability to work or attend school from home. Next slide. So here we kind of outline the process of analysis. We have a good idea of the groups of people who've been hit hardest by the economic fallout of the pandemic. And we want to use some spatial data to identify where these groups of people are most concentrated or where we have a lot of overlap along these lines of disadvantage so that we can center our engagement strategy on them. And so we know where to begin. So we decided to use American Community Survey data from the Census Bureau so that the geographic unit at which we were performing our analysis could be as small as a census tract. And we started by mapping out quite a few individual indicators like race, Hispanic origin, income levels, access to computers and broadband internet at home, English language proficiency, and so on. In analyzing these indicators on their own, we were able to identify a couple of spatial patterns along where these groups tend to live. And then we reduced our list of indicators to 10, which I have outlined on the next slide. And we created a kind of simple index that would help us look at where there are high concentrations of these people who fall under multiple of these categories of disadvantage, and where there's a lot of overlap between multiple categories of disadvantage. And then we finished by mapping out that index and comparing what spatial patterns it revealed to what we were seeing when we were mapping out these indicators individually. And this is how we've begun to identify the geographies that we're going to center our engagement on. Next slide. So here is our list of indicators that we've used. We used 2019 ACS data. On the left, we have these 10 indicators that are stand-ins for the groups we understand to have been hardest hit. And I've grouped them into kind of categories of how we've thought about them. So we've put them into race and ethnicity, income and employment status, as we know that people who were low income and underemployed before the pandemic were also hardest hit by it. We also know that people with poor housing stability or people who are overpaying for housing have been at higher risk of loss of housing through the pandemic. And as the eviction moratorium looks to end very shortly, we're going to keep an eye on that. And then we're also looking at who's had the ability to transition into working from home or going to school from home. Next slide, Molly. So to develop the map, we scored each census tract by how many of these indicators had scored in the top quintile or the top 20% for the region. So for example, if a census tract has 2 indicators that are scoring in the top quintile, maybe it has a low median household income and a high proportion of Hispanic households. When we have a census tract with a score of 2, it would receive a score of 2 in this map here and be shaded accordingly. So here's the map that the analysis put out for us. And what we're looking for here are the areas where the census tracts have a darker blue shading. And these are geographies that we understand are home to populations that have been most affected by the economic fallout. And they have a lot of overlap between these various groups. And what we see is these 2 key spatial patterns. We have the southern crescent along the southern portion of the metro area, and then we also have along the Buford Highway corridors where we are seeing the greatest overlap and concentration of these populations. Next slide, Molly. And this slide shows us the same map, but I've removed the blue shading from all census tracts that do not have at least 4 indicators scoring in the top quintile of our index. And once we remove the other blue shaded tracts, the pattern becomes a little more easy to follow. And then here on the right-hand side of the slide, I also have a couple of quick statistics just about the data. The median number of indicators that a tract would have in the top quintile for the whole region was 2. and nearly 2/3 of all tracts in the region were home to 2 or fewer of these high scoring indicators. And then as we've tried to narrow down our geography to focus just on those areas we understand to have been hardest hit, we're looking at places that have either 4 or 5 high scoring indicators. 25% of census tracts in the region have 4 or more. And when we put the threshold at 5 indicators, we're looking at 20% of census tracts within the region. And so that's where we are right now. This is kind of our preliminary geography of focus for community engagement for the SEDS. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Marion.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I think it's really helpful to understand the process by which we're identifying the communities that we really want to engage and really want to speak with and have a greater understanding of what they experienced during the pandemic and what their ideas are and needs are and desires are for a stronger future, like I mentioned. And this question is for you all: which local governments, regional planning agencies, community-based organizations are excelling at engaging with those community members that have been excluded from planning processes? And I think we're really looking for ideas from you all to see what you all think, who's doing a really great job of engaging their community members that have been excluded or ignored in previous years. And Molly, when you get a response, go ahead and share them.
It is set to show up as soon as we get those responses. So you should see them coming in soon.
And feel free to put them in the chat too, if that's easier. So I think the response to this question means we all have a lot of work to do. Molly, we can go to my presentation or the next slide. Maybe if you all can keep thinking about this and put responses in as we go. So I always start off all of my presentations with this slide. I think Sam's seen it many, many times, but a changing region requires different methods of communication, different methods of engagement, and not just one way of doing it. So next slide. And so here at the ARC since 2019, when we adopted our arts and culture and strategic and creative placemaking strategic plan, we've been working to incorporate arts and culture into our own work as a way of engaging community members. It's both related to community engagement, but also as a way of thinking about our work in different ways. So a couple of things we've done are included in this slide. And actually, I've included a lot of information in this presentation that I hope you all will take with you, but I won't read every slide and I kind of go through it pretty quickly. So next slide. So we put out an artist survey earlier this year and really needed to supplement that with interviews because the survey responses weren't as diverse as we would have liked. So we really focused on interviewing folks who we thought were not included in the survey responses. And I think this translates to how we want to do our engagement, generally speaking, is the survey doesn't always capture everyone, as you all know very well. And so these have to be supplemented and especially focused, again, like Ryan mentioned and I've mentioned earlier, is really centering the experiences of folks who are the most marginalized and who are not really ever included in our typical engagement strategies. Next slide. We also earlier this, or late last year, mapped Black arts organizations. Neighborhood Nexus helped us with that, as well as community partners mapping Black arts organizations to understand the ecosystem and landscape of arts organizations that are very much underfunded or inequitably funded by philanthropic organizations in Atlanta. And so we want to continue this work by mapping other diverse arts organizations, often because, you know, they're not always focused on just art, but really they're community-based organizations that are serving the needs of their communities. Next slide. And we're also working on an arts and planning handbook that is to share the lessons that we've learned with artists and planners and local government officials that are interested in successful community collaborations using arts and culture to address some of the needs and challenges in their own communities. Next slide. And so I really want to focus on ALMA, which is the Arts Leaders of Metro Atlanta this year, which just concluded in June. And of course it was held virtually, but we learned a lot from this program. Next slide. And the main point in this is that we had 6 teams. We divided the class into 6 cross-sector teams that were working on 3 different projects that really focused on community engagement, and specifically for groups that have been excluded in the past. Next slide. So one of the projects was working on arts in the alleys. Another project was working around creative placemaking around bus stops. And then this last project, which is what I'm going to talk about more, is artist-led and arts and culture-based community engagement, specifically to come up with ideas for community engagement for the SEDS. Next slide. And so the prompt for this project was A Region Remembers, and it was really inspired by some of these temporary or pop-up memorials that you see really in the early days of the pandemic. And this one was in Metro Atlanta. There were some in Metro Atlanta. There were some across the nation and across the country. And I want to say that, acknowledge that obviously we're still in the middle of this pandemic, that we're not out of it. And I also want to say that while this project focused on, you know, these memorials, this process of memorializing the victims of the pandemic, I think that it provides a really interesting way of thinking about engagement, and, you know, to think about and to center our most greatly impacted community members, to amplify their experiences and voices and narratives and their traditions and culture, and to ensure an equitable and just healing and recovery process rooted in collective care. And I think that using that prompt as a focus for our engagement, so many of our plans are forward facing, you know, what will this region be in 20 years? But given that we're still experiencing this pandemic and the heavy losses that many of us have experienced and are still experiencing now, that it would be really a compounded tragedy not to acknowledge the pandemic and the loss and economic loss too in the SEDS. Next. So the deliverables for the project were, we asked for recommendations for an artist-led community engagement process that again prioritizes the involvement and healing of community members in the process of memorializing COVID, centering those communities most affected by COVID, and translating the experience across physical and virtual spaces. Next. And as well as a proposal for a temporary arts and culture focused community activation or installation to demonstrate how community members can experience and interact with any proposed memorial and surrounding public space. And I want to mention too that this was really about the process, how to create a stronger process of community engagement beyond our standard practice of 3 public meetings. What could we do that would really be effective in reaching the communities that we don't always reach, as well as providing an environment where, again, it's not just forward-looking, but it also really elevates and is respectful of the experiences of our community members. Next slide. So I'm going to basically point out some things from 2 of the projects. So 2 of the teams worked on this project, and I'm going to highlight some of the elements in their final presentations. So this project was, they thought about this prompt in terms of counties. So they would play, this is really a county focused proposal. Next slide. Did I do something? Oh, thanks. Okay, so I won't go over everything, but I really appreciated how thoughtful this team was. About, am I the only one who's seeing? Okay, next slide. Sorry, Molly, I'm seeing like someone scroll through the slides. So, so this, one of the key components of this program was a residency program. So where the artists would be in residence in the community that was selected or wanted to participate in this process, that they would be there for, well, the whole thing would be 6 months, but they would be in the community for a couple of months, working with community members, speaking with community members. And another important point in this is that this team asked ARC, but really it could be whoever is managing this project, to provide a cultural sensitivity and awareness consultant and an expressive arts therapist because of the nature of what would be discussed, because of the grief and the healing that the grief and the trauma that people have been experiencing and continue to experience during the pandemic, that something beyond just, someone beyond just an artist, or maybe an artist that was trained in this could be there to help community members in their processing and their healing, and even just talking about what they've experienced during the pandemic. Next slide. And the role of the artist here is what I want to focus on. Again, you'll see in the 3rd section that the artist would conduct interviews with individuals in the county to grasp how the pandemic has affected them in their community. Next slide. And I thought this slide was really helpful. That the potential project themes of oral history or ancestry, sharing stories, and coming together are all really great ideas around how to frame and structure this engagement process. Next slide. And then finally, again, they wanted to reiterate that the activities and the engagement activities of the artist with the community would all be supported by a cultural sensitivity and awareness consultant or an expressive arts therapist to address the sensitive nature of the activation. Next slide. So the second proposal was a healing garden, and I really appreciated this team because they went beyond just addressing COVID, but their central question that they asked themselves and that they were asking, and that they would be asking community members, is what are you healing from? So, obviously in 2020 and now, and much further before 2020, there have been so many issues that people have faced, and also, but specifically in 2020, the racial and social justice movement, Black Lives Matter, and then during ALMA, the Asian spa shootings, all of these were occurring around this time. And so their question was about much more than COVID, although COVID is the immediate challenge, but they wanted to provide a place to heal, to plant, release, and convene So their project was really around healing. Next slide, please. So what is a healing hall? The healing hall is an innovative lab space. And at the center of this is a healing garden, which serves to unify, heal, release, and convene, curated by artists, but led by the community. And this space would be movable, flexible, accessible, and safe. And I think that that's really a key point here is that, with typical engagement strategies, how often do we think of creating a safe space? Again, going back to my first slide, how diverse the region is becoming. What does safety look like or feel like for different members of our community? Safety doesn't always feel like one thing. There's not one thing or one place that feels safe for everyone. And so this idea of creating safety to provide healing was really important and a challenge, a worthy challenge, I think, for all of us who work in community engagement. Next slide. So why this healing hall? Again, their proposal focused around nature as a healing space and nature as a place of grounding and connectivity. Next slide. They provided some ways to identify and reach people, and I won't read them all. Hopefully you'll review the slide later. Next slide. And then getting buy-in. And again, I wanted to emphasize, working with people in the community, working with local government officials, private sector representatives, and working to define what a safe space is in that specific community. Next slide. So looking ahead, well, I just wanted to wrap up all of the things that I just discussed and share. These are some upcoming ways that we are trying to implement what we've discussed and implement some of these ideas that we've learned from ALMA and their proposals. And so our fall arts forum is really going to be focused around seeking Black, Indigenous, and people of color artists and arts and culture community-based organizations who are interested in designing community planning projects. And then, of course, SED's consultant selection is taking place now, and then the engagement process will be in winter to summer of next year. And then ALMA will take place next spring. So if you want to work on things like I've just discussed, please come join us at the Arts Forum and ALMA of next year. So I think that's all. Next slide. Oh.
It appears
this is
the
great.
responses from the last poll showed up on this one, but this is a second question. So if everyone wants to add in some additional thoughts about how we can effectively communicate and engage with communities.
Yes, and
keep
the
responding to this one.
Boston Area Planning Council is like next level arts and culture based community engagement. So please go to MAPC and check out all of the resources they have. Next slide. Or do we have are people still responding, Molly?
Not seeing anything coming in, but as you all know, we are having some technical issues with Poll Everywhere. So if you aren't seeing it appear here, you can also throw it in the chat for us.
Yeah, and Molly, this presentation will be shared, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, and if you need to contact me or Ryan, please feel free to do so. Our last slide has our email addresses.
Hey, Molly, if you go back to the last slide, there's a scroll bar on the right, you can actually scroll down and see some more responses.
Oh, great. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this. Thank you. I'll turn it back to Carrie.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Marion and Ryan, for that great presentation. As we've been discussing, the process is just as important as the document itself, and it will make the document a much stronger resource for our communities, all the communities at ARC. So I will turn it over. I don't think I'm going to look in the chat. I don't think we had any specific questions at this time. Feel free to add questions in as we go for myself or any of the presenters. We may have some time at the end of the meeting. So I'll pass it over to Kelsey.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you to Molly and Sam for allowing me to be here today. Are we good? I'm not seeing my video.
I've got the video up.
Awesome. Sounds
Yeah.
good to me then. Anyway, my name is Kelsey Wade-Haas. I am the Sustainability Coordinator here at ARC. I'm in the Natural Resources Group, and if you've heard of me before, it is probably because I am the Green Communities Program Manager. But today I'm actually going to talk to you guys and give you all an overview of sort of what to expect over the next few LUCCs. Molly has graciously allowed me a few minutes during each of them to sort of do some deep dives on climate resources that are available to cities and counties. Now, today, you can go start on these resources, getting into climate mitigation and climate adaptation. As we speak, they are free to no cost. Just to start this conversation of, as you know, national conversations of climate increase, just to start this dialogue between ARC and our cities and counties on what their climate concerns are and different areas that we can support, different areas of technical assistance that we can provide or guide you to that can sort of be implemented now rather than continuing to wait and just see what comes down the pipeline. So we can head to the next slide.
Hey, Kelsey, before we get started, we're hearing a really high-pitched noise coming from your audio.
Oh no, that is not great. Let me mute that. How about now? Is it still there?
It's still there, yep.
Oh goodness. Okay. Let me see if I can switch to phone audio. And I will try dialing in.
Thanks everyone for your patience. Kelsey's just going to get on the phone audio and then we'll keep going with her presentation.
There we go. How does this sound?
Sounds great.
Okay, wonderful. I'm sorry about that. I'm glad we got that fixed up, but we can head on to the next slide now. So just to start us out with some background information, ARC has done climate work in the past. Starting in 2010, these are some of the more official work products that ARC has put out. But a lot of our work, as I'm going to talk about, is inherently climate work. We just don't necessarily label it that way. On this particular slide, I do want to draw attention to a few documents that I will circle back to in a later slide. And one document is going to be that 2014 climate change and the impact of community design on greenhouse gas emissions. And then another few documents that I want us to hold in our minds are going to be that 2015 utility climate resiliency study and the 2018 vulnerability and resiliency framework. So we have done this in the past. This is not anything new, but a stumbling block for the entire United States is sort of how to implement climate work. And so that is what these short briefings are going to be, is sort of options for entry into implementing climate work. Before we move on to the next slide, I do always want to give a shout out to our city simulator tool. It is wonderful for scenario planning. If you have not heard of it or seen a presentation on it, it's a really wonderful tool for looking at our infrastructure systems and seeing how they can react to shocks and stressors that are coming down the pipeline. I don't necessarily lead that tool, but we do have staff here at ARC, and it is wonderful for looking at different climate events that can happen and sort of helping your city scenario or county scenario plan for that. So again, hold that greenhouse gas emissions study in your mind, as well as those two resiliency documents, and we can head on to the next slide. We are doing climate work currently here at ARC, but just like at your city or county level, local governments, we don't necessarily label all of these things as climate work. So Georgia Commute Options, works on decreasing tailpipe emissions. That is climate work. The CDAP project, the East Point Food Systems Plan that went through a couple of years ago, that is inherently climate work. East Point considering their food systems in their community, how their food systems within their bounds can stand alone against the shocks and stressors that the West is experiencing with these wildfires, with these droughts, where a lot of our food supply comes from. That is inherently climate work. Our sustainability program participants through the Green Communities program, the Sustainable Connections internship program, all of that is inherently climate work. Our TIP framework is increasingly paying attention to resiliency in their scoring metrics of projects. And then if you attended the ARC board meeting a couple of weeks ago, Mike Alexander introduced the Climate Operations Organization, quippily named CO2. This is an internal team across CLC groups that is looking at climate-specific work in both existing programs and where we can grow our existing work set throughout CRC to be more climate conscious. So we can head on to the next slide. And this slide is going to be probably my most important one and what I really want us to take away a clear understanding of from this presentation. And this is going to be using the correct terminology and understanding what this terminology means. So I'm going to start with climate mitigation first. This is also called climate action. It is a proactive reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So really looking at the sources and the cause of man-made climate change and trying to address that. This has a lot to do with data and policy. The phrasing is, you can't measure what you can't track. So we have a lot of work to do on tracking our greenhouse gas emissions, measuring our greenhouse gas emissions, and then taking proactive steps to reduce that. And that's where I want to recall that 2014 document about community design and greenhouse gas emissions. That is a climate mitigation example. We're looking at the data, we are looking at the emissions, and we're looking at solutions for proactively reducing those emissions. On the other side of the climate coin that is linked to mitigation but is different are going to be a lot of the projects and big flashy grants that you'll see coming down the pipeline, and that has to do with climate adaptation. So anytime climate resiliency is mentioned, that is what we are speaking to, is the climate adaptation. And adaptation is going to deal with reactive responses to these climate situations, to the flooding that we've seen in China, Germany, Pakistan recently. All of the responses to that are resiliency and adaptation efforts. So this is addressing the effects of climate change, of man-made climate change. And these adaptation and resiliency pieces really focus more on processes and people. So those are our two terminologies. Sometimes people misuse them interchangeably. So I really want to just make sure that we are clear about the proactive, the reactive, the cause, the effect. And when we're looking at climate projects, if we're addressing mitigation or adaptation, ideally we do both, but oftentimes we're only doing one of them, when really all of our climate projects and all of our work should be considering both sides of this climate situation. So we can head to my last slide, and this is a rather overwhelming slide. It's sort of meant to be, and it's meant to be because there are so many different ways and entry points that our local governments can engage in climate work. And it's also a little chaotic because all of our local governments are different. No two cities or counties are the same, and we're all going to be having more urgent issues on our plate than the other city or county next to us. For example, one city or county may have a flood of solar residential permits, and that their permitting staff is overwhelmed and can't get to reviewing all these plans in time. There's a resource for that we can implement today, tomorrow, next week to help you guys sort of single track that and streamline that process. Another issue might be a community that's super concerned about their tree ordinance, their tree canopy. Are they a tree-friendly city? Are their policies sound? Are they prepared? You know, and there are resources for that we can walk you through. Another may be flooding. Flooding is a massive issue, not only globally, but here in Metro Atlanta. We have resources for that. So everyone starts at a different place, and climate work is ingrained in all of these different subject areas. So what I'm hoping to do over the next few LUCCs is sort of take 5 to 8 minutes. I'll pick a single resource and do a quick, brief, deep dive on what that resource is, who runs it. A lot of them are Federal Department of Energy resources, which are free to low cost, excuse me. Others are nonprofits that are also very low cost, just trying to get climate mitigation and adaptation at the forefront of our planning processes when we're looking at different projects. So I would actually really love if your community has something they are particularly interested in or asking about, to please let me know where you would like to start. If clean energy is where you would like to focus, we can start on that conversation on looking at how our cities and counties can engage and enable more clean energy. If our land use systems are something we want to discuss, obviously let's do that. Food systems, we've seen through the East Point plan, that's an increasing conversation in the area. So please reach out, let me know where you would like to start. Otherwise, we'll just be doing some brief deep dives into these different resources as sound bites, as starting points, as entry level into climate work. And I do want to just note that I put on webinars that do even deeper dives that are about an hour long for your planners. I offer AICP continuing maintenance credits for them, and they are even deeper dives into different areas. We hosted NREL about their solar app software. Recently, we hosted Columbia Law about their model law pro bono project, writing climate laws for local governments and states. We've also hosted a lot with Georgia Power on their energy efficiency offerings, their electric vehicle offerings. So this conversation touches all industries and sectors. Please let me know where you'd like to start so that I can really guide these deep dives and tailor them to what our communities are concerned about. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Kelsey. Very exciting to connect it to the SEDS a bit. Our natural resources are an asset for our region, but also a challenge. So appreciate all the work you're doing on that. We had 2 great comments in the chat. I'll just go over those. That Sandy Springs will be using the city simulator through the CDAP program. So they're really excited to get started. As well as City of Lawrenceville made a comment that they're interested in looking into their tree ordinance. So definitely contact Kelsey Helen and hopefully you can get that started. So we're just about at time. I did want to thank our guest speakers, Misty and Greg, for participating, and our own Marion and Ryan for doing a great job going over our community engagement strategy. Wanted to stress that we need all of the communities on this call and the communities in the region to be a partner in our process for the SEDS. It's going to be a stronger document and a usable document moving forward if we have great participation. So with that, unless Molly or Sam have anything else, give them a second. Doesn't appear that they do. So I will close out the meeting and thank you all for participating, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions about the SEDS or any help that you need from ARC. So have a great day.
Bye, everyone.